call to order the August 20th, 2019 Lake Mills City Council meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Fields?
Here.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Here.
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Mr. Fritsch?
Here.
Ms. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Buckholz?
I'd like to move on to item number 3, Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone stand at hand? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 4. Correction and/or approval of the City Council minutes for August 6, 2019. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion or any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay. Correspondence. We would like to mention some of the correspondence. We did receive some as a council, and they were included in our packet. Someone want to speak to that, or?
I received copies of 3 letters regarding the Sandy Beach grant to the Waterways Commission from 3 different groups of citizens. And I also received a petition signed by a number of citizens that live in the area of Ferry Drive, asking us not to extend Ferry Drive to Sandy Beach.
I received the same 4 documents. I also did receive one email and had a constituent come over and talk to me from the Sandy Beach area to go through the plan for the improvements down there, and then stated that he was for it and wanted us to proceed.
And I received the one letter, the South Ferry Drive letter.
I also received the South Ferry Drive letter too.
I also received an email from one of my constituents saying that they were in favor of extending Ferry Drive so that they wouldn't have to go up to Main Street and then back down Sandy Beach in order to go into Sandy Beach with their bike, and also that they could use it when they were going to the bike trail and not have to go to Main Street to do that. So we've got people on both sides of the table on this issue. So, all right, anybody else have any other correspondence? People on Mulberry Street would like me to wave my magic wand and move things along faster on Mulberry. It's been a long, slow process, but it's coming slowly. So, but I will speak for them because they've been speaking to me. So, okay. Let's go on to questions and public comment. Okay. The public is encouraged to address the council at this time regarding items on the agenda. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting has been called to order. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the council on items that are not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments limited to 3 minutes and state your name and address when starting your comments, and fill out the sign-in sheet provided on the podium. if someone would like to speak, please come up.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Doug Millay. I live at 731 South Ferry. One of the letters that you received was addressed from myself and my wife. I wrote the letter in opposition to the grant, not because of the improvements to Sandy Beach, but in the bundling, I'll call it that for lack of a different thing, the bundling of all phases of this. There's several residents along Ferry Drive have had, this has only come up recently, and I know I give credit to the city because you do put a lot of information out there. Unfortunately, it hasn't found its way as this entire package of all three phases. Third phase, the Sandy Beach, there's not a lot of objection to it. The objection that our group was talking about was the fact that the state funding triggers the plan in its entirety, at least the way we see it. There's been no real discussion as far as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 actually being open discussion and separate issues. They're all being piled into one big vote or one big program, and our group feels that if the state funds one piece of it, it gives kind of a license to approve the entire plan, meaning the continuation of Ferry Drive to the Sandy Beach. Our concern, and I know you've gotten other letters, which I've read too, our concern is that we've enjoyed the Main Street traffic this whole season. And all kidding aside, when people are roaring by in their cars with their trailers attached, I've stood there, I'm right across from the high school, and I've watched parents yank their kids back. I've been at Bartles Beach, and I've watched the exact same thing. I'm all for improving the town. But when I improve my home, I make sure my neighbors are in agreement with my improvements. You may have gotten a letter saying they want to take their bike over there. And from the letter, I think you saw that a lot of people said, yeah, we're okay with a path or a way to get there, and even make it access for emergency vehicles. But to turn Ferry Drive into a highway through the trailer park, by the way, where there will be more children to get hit by cars, there is no advantage to it. We've just redone Main Street. The trailers have managed to go that way for years. The only people that will use that ferry extension are people basically trailing boats in and people going to Sandy Beach. As a result, they'll also be driving right through your brand new developed trailer community. So our group would like you to at least consider that at worst case, the extension be limited to foot traffic, bike traffic, community park area. In my past, I've lived in a community where there's gates that an emergency vehicle can get in the case of an emergency. You don't have to make it a highway that goes through Ferry Drive. I will invite any member of this board to come and spend a morning with me, and I'll buy the coffee, and you can watch how many cars come roaring by with trailers on them. They're not going to work. It's an absolute joke. And if that becomes the standard, I don't think that's really fair to the Sandy Beach people. I don't think it's even fair to the trailer park area, and I definitely know it's not fair to the people on Ferry Drive. Thank you.
We're not allowed to address anything, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it.
I'm sorry, what?
I mean-
I was asking if we could address your statements, but
No, it's,
what we will have to do is put it on another agenda.
one thing I will just take 2 seconds here. I've been here for 26 years in this community. I would like to see if you have extra dollars to spend to extend a street, I would like us to spend it on improving the south end of Main Street. I know it's in a tax improvement district, but quite frankly, when you come into this town, it looks like a junkyard. And when you go to Sandy Beach, it looks like a junkyard. So it's time to look at those things and say, okay, what are we doing here? Why do we need this road when we have this looking like that? So just as a side comment, if we have extra dollars, I have no problem with us spending it there.
Thank you.
I think you, the one thing I would say is that the boat launch has absolutely no connection to the rest of the phases, and 3 phases would be, there are 7 phases. And so I wouldn't make that connection.
That was
The
what I
boat
was-
launch is set up as a total standalone project and could remain that way without any of the other improvements. And we do it that way because with a phased project over as long a period of time as this is, things could change substantially between now and then. So that would be the one thing I would say would be it.
That was the thing I was going to say too, that it is not the intent of this council to make this one fell swoop. We're doing it segment by segment by segment, and, you know, that's how we always intended to do it, and that's how we've been doing it, so.
We always recommend as a staff to do it as capable of being a standalone project, because if for some reason you can't do any of the other parts, it wouldn't work efficiently. So this was designed as a total standalone project. The next one will be designed as a total standalone project, which is the parking lot and the restaurant. And then we move on from there. And we do that because council's changing, so you don't know, or you don't know what our financial position is going to be. You don't know if there's going to be a recession. I'm guaranteeing there's not, but there could be. And so those are the types of things we try and plan for in the long run, so.
Well, and emergencies come up in cities. Nobody in their mind had ever thought we were going to have to rebuild downtown with the road going out by the Legion. I mean, I was on the council, and I can tell you, we had not talked about rebuilding Main Street and that whole project, and that was not cheap. So, I mean, something like that could happen. City could be hit by a tornado. All kinds of things could happen. And that's why we are doing this in step by step by step, because we can't. We have to do it that way for the city. So, okay, I'm sorry. I said more than I should. I'm sorry. Howdy, go. All right. You may speak.
Hi, I'm Robin Unz. I'm with the Lake Mills Ashland Historical Society and the Lake Mills Preservation Guild, which is a recently organized group of people. I'm going to address the archaeological evaluation that you guys have in front of you, and I really encourage you to take the time to read and learn from it. It's got a lot of really valuable information, and as you're thinking about this project, I really hope you see it not as a hindrance to this project, but something to enhance it. And take the time and think of how we can include some of this cultural history that we've learned from this into this project. And we have such a multi-layered cultural history here in Lake Mills, going prehistoric, you know, ancient Native American, woodland Native American, early 20th century or 19th century. And we want to embrace it and encourage and get people to appreciate it when they come visit at our locations. And Sandy Beach is a perfect venue for this because it's already a public park. It's not like it's a subdivision. I think there's opportunities to put some educational plaques up, some recognition of what the cultural history was at that location, and just enjoy it. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. And thank you for coming tonight. I don't think I said that before, but appreciate you taking the time and the involvement. Okay. Hello.
I'm Carol Burrows. Right now, I am hosting the senior center, so to speak, and I noticed the letter that was written and included in the agendas for tonight. And that came about because the rec department at the school district is going to be the umbrella that our senior center goes under very quickly now. We really feel from the ad hoc committee forward that was the best way to have that be sustainable for Lake Mills. And so we are working towards that goal. We, 2 people from the rec department, Ben and Jane, along with me, went over to visit Susan Maloney, who is the director of Rock Lake Activity Center, And I walked around the building and thought, there are places here that have to be improvised a little bit or changed in order for it to be totally accessible for some of the members who have been coming. And I really shouldn't call them members, they're attendees because we have no membership. Everything we have done till this point has been either a donation for us for our senior center, or we were the recipients of the Roundup at the market twice, so we've had money to be able to pay rent and buy coffee and donuts and all kinds of things, but that's not going to last forever. So we really feel that going under the umbrella of the rec department is a very good move for us. However, when I went around the Rock Lake Activity Center building and saw that there was really no place, there are a couple of people who come each time we are open, and they come in the area off of the west parking lot, which has an elevator. There are no steps involved at all. And even getting up on a curb from a car would need somebody assisting them. So our request was to have a curb part possibly taken out so that we could drive. And I think the best place would be the east side of the building, because there's a door on the side of the building of Rock Lake Activity Center that is accessible then with no steps. Actually, I went over this afternoon and looked, and there is, now that it has been cleaned up, there's also, the whole back could have a few parked cars back there. It may not be ideal, but our ideal is waiting for us. All the plans are there and we're waiting. So anyway, I just wanted to explain a little bit about it, and that was the request. It didn't make quite the sense that maybe you thought it should have. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got one talking about what we discussed in the committee. Is there any problem with the, if I remember rightly, the plans, there is no problem to get from that entrance over to where the senior center was designed to be, is there?
No, well, that would be all redone. With the new plans, the blueprints that are drawn up, no, that would be redone, that would not be a problem.
So
Because
what does the city have to, what do you see as the city having to do to help facilitate the,
I'll talk about that in the city manager's report.
okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, we've got a couple people here. We're going to battle it out. That's what we like to see.
We're going to say the same thing.
Right over the mic.
I'm Ann Werner, 1009 South Ferry Drive. Last house on the right on Ferry. I also oppose the extension of Ferry Drive. The traffic that we've seen down there during construction of Main Street with the detour going through Ferry, it's been horrible, just as this gentleman has said. I don't know who did the signage for the detour, but, you know, there's also a dead-end sign coming into that section of Ferry Drive, and cars just blow right through, don't pay any attention to any of the signs, and I'm sure it'll just get worse with the extension of Ferry Drive, so I just wanted to let you know that I oppose it also.
I don't think that was an official detour.
Melissa Fearman, 225 Circle Drive, Lake Mills. I also oppose the extension of South Ferry Drive. I live right on Circle Drive, and to get out of our road, it's almost it's like a blind driveway. But the construction, there's a lot more cars going through, it's hard to get out. We've seen an increase in traffic. We have kids at our house. I don't see any benefit of extending South Ferry. I also was here back in March or February talking about the owls and the trees, and looking at your plans for Sandy Beach, I see a lot of trees getting removed close to the lake. Those trees have been here for 100, maybe 200 years. I don't know why we can't try to save more trees. When you drive down Main Street now, it looks like a different world. There's no trees. And with all of the progress we have, we're taking out trees. So when you're looking at your plans, please try to save the trees. There's wildlife that uses them. They provide great shade. I used to lifeguard at Sandy Beach and Bartles Beach, and the shady side was actually probably more popular than the sunny side. If you go down there ever, you'll see tons of people in the shade by the water. I appreciate that you're saving the trees by the playground, but I hope you look at the ones by the water too. I just want to make sure you look at the trees when you're looking at your plans, and also the archaeological factors. There's really cool Indian history back there, and if we can help save that or protect it, that would be wonderful too. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, all of you. Anyone else wish to speak in public comment?
Good evening. I'm Pam Murphy. My husband and I live next to the Malays on 725 South Ferry Drive, and just want to echo all the comments that we definitely are opposed to the extension of Ferry Drive. I'm now living in Madison and working in Madison, obviously living here, but leaving the our property mornings about 6:30 in the morning. The cars that are coming down, the hill going 40, 45 miles an hour. It's crazy where you have to, sit and wait to get out of our driveways. I'm right across from the high school. I'm very concerned about the kids that are there. Obviously, football players are out there now, softball's out going on all the time, and kids not being able to cross the streets. It's very, very busy. It's very treacherous, and just very concerned on if it becomes a broader road than it is, or extended into the down by Sandy Beach. Just very concerned about that going forward. So just wanted to echo that we are opposed to the extension of Ferry Drive.
Thanks for coming. Anyone else wish to speak? Really want to thank all of you that took the time to come tonight. Thank you to those of you who communicated with us in other ways. We appreciate that. We appreciate the time it takes to look at the agenda and see what's on it. Obviously, we can't force feed anything, even though we would like people to be more active than they are. But thank you for your activity. Seeing no one else at the podium, we'll move on to item 7, City Manager's Report. Steve, you're on.
I provided with the agenda the July utility check register, the July Police Department report, the 2020 Census New Construction Program letter, the Enbridge Station tour invite. So and then I provided the letter from Jane Riedel about the RLAC, and that was about there's a paved area along the east end of the school, and it runs to the playground that's on the north side, and they were asking about using that as a driveway. So Dwayne and I went out and evaluated it, because you can't have two driveways within 100 feet of each other on the same property. And it meets that requirement. The width of the asphalt pavement on the east side is 33 feet, and then it's got a concrete sidewalk. So we could pop in a driveway and run two-way traffic in and out. The back is a playground, so it's full of basketball hoops. They're gone now? So that would be an important feature. I also recommend that the parking be set up in a specific fashion, and that we have some extra jersey barriers. I would use some jersey barriers to protect the corners of the buildings.
What's a jersey barrier?
It's 3 feet by 1 foot, 2 foot.
And what's it do?
Concrete.
If you think about
Piece of concrete.
construction where they put
Yeah.
the temporary concrete
dividers.
barriers on the interstate.
Oh, those
Be-
things.
Be like a jersey barrier.
Okay, You put them in with equipment.
Yeah.
Set them down.
You
where
set them
want
down, and then they control
To
the flow of
protect
track.
the building and
To
so.
protect the building.
Driving into it and backing into it. Okay,
We've-
gotcha.
You know, when you get into those tight spots like that and under those types of conditions, the building would probably take a beating unless you kind of
Yeah, rather replace a
provided some
barrier than
method
the
of-
building wall.
of doing that. So we have the Jersey barriers. It would probably cost us, $1,300 to put the driveway in. We can do it now with our maintenance contract but that was why it was on there. They've asked, and so we'll look at that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Where would the funding come from?
Out of the street maintenance account, we have that concrete contract. It would just be a part of that.
So wouldn't break the budget.
No. We have a lot of funding for our K-9, but we do not have an agreement with the union, and we're still struggling to get an MOU finalized. They want us to be like the big cities, and I don't think we need to go that direction.
Is it money, or is it just what they're?
It's a group of items. Money was one of them. Nowadays, it gets to be more about comp time than money. But what happens with comp time is you get so much comp time that everybody's off all the time, because we got officers, most of them who are close to retirement, so they all have 5 weeks of vacation, and then they stack up all the comp time they can get. And the more comp time you get, the more demand there is for officers, because everybody's off. So instead of having a police force of 10 or 11, you need 15. So the union is highly in favor of that, because 15 officers paying union dues is more than 10. So,
Well, and it would also make it easier for the officers if there were more officers to spread it over.
right.
I mean, it isn't just,
No, so we try and control the comp time and manage the vacation time, and
always something.
Are they allowed to bank that up, or do they have to use it?
they have to
Calendar
use
year.
it within a certain period of time. The request was for the K-9 officer to be able to comp time more. And we were like, no. We already have problems keeping officers on. We'd rather pay the cash.
Especially if that person's going to be utilized on a lot of call-ins, a lot of extra overtime, just because of the uniqueness of that position.
The other one is that the union contract says that management gets to make all these decisions. And then they start throwing in, well, except for that, you can't call them in unless there's 5 days prior agreement, and so,
I
you
hope
know.
they tell us 5 days in advance when we have an emergency.
They would have come in, but there were some things like that were getting to be a little bit.
That would be quite a
over the
world we'd
edge.
live in.
Anyway, South Main Street, last Tuesday, I was in Rib Mountain.
You were
They
what?
had the meeting. I was in Rib Mountain
Oh, yes.
at the Waterways Commission meeting. The meeting they talked about opening Lake Park Place to be able to close Woodland Beach Road. There was some communication issues in that our people all walked away thinking that they wouldn't close Woodland Beach Road until they had asphalted the connections on Lake Park Place.
Boy, that's just common sense.
Well, there are some other key features that go along with that, but, so we didn't make any changes to the road signage that was out there, and they pulled out too much signage in some areas, and they left some signage in other areas that made it really confusing. So if you have the state signage, which is confusing, and then our signage, which it didn't get moved because we didn't think it was going to be opened, it got pretty confusing down there. So we met right away Monday morning, tried to get it all cleaned up. Of course, they have to have a contractor come in, so he had to come in this morning. We had ours done in the afternoon about, 3:30, 4 o'clock, maybe a little later. But hopefully it's matched up now. There will be some complicating issues out of this in that Thursday they have to pave the connections now. So, normally your paver would come in and pave one side, and then go pave the other side, and then go back and lay the second layer, and then go back and lay the second layer on the other side. Well, now they have to do half the street and half the street, and then go back. And so it's gotten a little bit more complicated because the way they opened the street, actually the way they closed Woodland Beach Road. So that was a lot of the conversation today. Actually, they're moving along. They're substantially ahead of schedule.
Send them to Mulberry.
The project looks like it's going to meet all the requirements. The only main issue we had outstanding was the amount of fill that got put in on the sewer line. So that's going good.
How far can you go now on South Main?
You
With
can
your
go to
car?
Lake Park Place.
And then turn and go up Lake Park Place?
You can go either direction on Lake Park Place right now. It's a little tight because they got barricades in from all four directions, and then they have stop signs set there, but technically you're supposed, the way the detour route was set up in the original plans, at this point, you're supposed to be able to drive all the way down to Lake Park Place. And then the local access route should take you east to Pinnacle and then Pinnacle out. So,
But it is an inconvenience for the people on South Ferry and Woodland Beach Road that live there. 'Cause
yeah, they have to
go
come back
up
around.
and come up Lake
Yeah,
Park
they can't
Place.
go out Woodland Beach Road.
Okay.
There's no exit. It'll be fun for the football game Friday night.
Are we going to have extra help with routing traffic?
Not that I know of. They haven't asked for
School
any.
district, can they request help?
Well, that's
Lakeside.
Lakeside Lutheran.
Okay, so
There's
they
the
can.
high school have theirs Thursday night. It'll be up here.
Friday night, okay. So it'll be a problem for both.
There was a certain amount of street damage that occurred on Grove and Pinnacle that will be divided up between the contractors from the school and the South Main Street project or repair. Traffic control is going to get to be a larger issue when they move into the phases next year, so we're starting to work on that right now because I wasn't happy with the way it went. Mulberry Street, we got our change order for the We Energies delay, so we sent that to We Energies and asked them to pay it. When we got into Madison Street, the water main that runs kind of east and west in there, there were 3 of them. They were all 6 inches and smaller lead joint. We weren't sure how they tied together. There was some confusion there. And they were buried 4 feet deep instead of the normal 6.5 feet. So all the design work on the storm sewer was based on it being 6 feet deep. So we had to go in again and shut the water off again and cut a saddle into the water main so we could run the storm sewer into the box. Then as we started to head north, Frontier had been instructed to bury their conduit at 84 inches and they buried it at 43. And so it was right in the middle of the storm sewer again, so we had to do additional redesign, so it's been that kind of a project.
Few people were pulling out hair.
Yeah, everybody. So it's continuing. There was a lot of time and material work done there because of the
And-
water main being 4 feet deep.
And inconvenience to our businesses
Yep.
on that corner.
Yep.
Who were without water. It's kind of hard to function without water.
Yeah, it's amazing that some of our facilities that people take for granted are pretty hard to live without.
Especially when you're not expecting it.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem. Also,
They came in Tuesday and asked to do an emergency shutdown on Grant. We denied that. they should have known. They were the ones that installed the water main, and they didn't realize how far it was away from the manhole. So that was their problem. So we're continuing to work through those. Made a change order today that allowed them to fill a storm sewer rather than remove it, because it saves them a lot of time.
Okay. So in case it breaks, it doesn't collapse.
Yes.
How long before pavement started?
Well, first we have to have sidewalks and curbs.
Yeah, and you have to have all the base done. So like, we've added additional base, and we've added the geotextile material to the base,
Yeah.
because the base is all mud. And the dry weather's probably gonna be gone now. We're probably gonna rain every day so it's not gonna get any easier.
We have 3 days of dry weather coming.
Could be.
That's something.
So in other words, we'll have pavement by the end of August?
Oh, no.
Oh, shoot, no.
No.
By the end of
We'll
September?
be lucky if we have a driveway by then. I do want to mention, I don't know if you have it on your list, but the electric utility is putting in the crosswalks at Fargo for the kids to cross,
Actually, the rapid flashing beacons,
those things.
rapid reflective, yeah.
Yeah, they're putting those in right now. And they're jolly on the spot doing it while the road is open. So they're doing a good job.
American Way is done, as is CP Avenue. So if you've driven out that way, you can go on
Yeah,
American Way
it's
all the way
really
into
nice.
Brookstone.
It's a good field trip.
Yeah.
Everybody in town can take their car out, go see the water tower, come on in, come down American Way. It's quite nice. If we could get CP Avenue down and through, it'd be even nicer.
Yeah, so everything there looks pretty good from all I can see. Rosewood and Oak Brook will be paved shortly, probably in a week or two.
Which road?
Rosewood and Oak Brook.
Oh,
So we'll probably see building permits going out of here in about 3 weeks for those.
September 5th is what the email said. They plan to get it all done in one day?
Paving it?
The
Yeah.
5th and the
Yeah,
6th, but...
Yeah, once the concrete's down, the paving goes fast.
Oh, okay.
They did all that American Way in one day,
Did they?
American Way and CP Avenue. Brooks, the street maintenance contracts, they've started pulverizing the streets of Brooks, Mildred, and Harvey. I don't know if you've noticed that. They'll probably start getting that paved in another week or two. They are also doing oil and chip starting September 3rd. We've tried to convince them not to do Birch Street on the 3rd. So. The library is still moving forward. You'll probably see staking moving in out there in a week or two. And then they'll start grading and seeding somewhere around this, they'll start grading and prepping somewhere around the second week in September.
What are we doing with that driveway that goes on to Oak Street? Because, it's really quite an incline.
Yeah, it's going down, but the debate is how much of the sidewalk do we pull out and
Yeah,
redo,
I know, because all those houses on that side are up high. But we also have to think about bottoms of cars trying to get out of that drive. I hope somebody takes a look at that.
Will it require a lot of fill to bring up the parking lot in the back there?
No, they're taking it down, so. But the driveway is, would be down, it's just, do you bring the sidewalks down and go up like this? That's all.
Or put a
And you got-
retaining wall in at the house next door.
Yeah, well, that gets really expensive and time consuming.
Well, we've done it other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, but we've had money then too. This is a library project under a limited fund.
Yeah. Well, I'm not thinking making, whatever. I'm just saying that's another alternative.
The lead service laterals, we're down to what, 22?
Ooh, wow. Are we having a party after the 22nd one?
Well, no.
Too bad.
Dan's got to send some letters to motivate, so until that, until that's done, I don't think we'll celebrate. But we're getting close, the DNR is pretty pleased. We haven't heard anything on radium, have another meeting on corrosion control. The water tower painting is done, and the water tower is full again.
And it looks very nice.
Good.
I mean, are you guys happy with the water tower?
I think the letter should have been bigger.
Letter should have been bigger? Are you
They're
kidding?
40 feet
Or-
across.
Are you okay with it?
I'm okay with
He's
it.
okay with it. All right. Yeah, well, Doug's still upset we didn't get a smiley face, so don't feel bad. Right, Doug?
Still wanted the disco ball.
I wanted pink with purple polka dots.
Yeah, you just can't have everything.
Brookstone subdivision is moving forward. Like I noted, the plat has been recorded. Construction is almost, well, at least 50% done. The electric is on tonight's agenda. You approve it, and we'll be able to install the electric. And like I said, we've already got notice that they'll be asking for 2 building permits in a couple weeks. Have you been by Dog and Shrub? It's going up. I don't know, but
What?
Dog and Shrub.
Shrub and shrub.
It's a distillery just north of the Light and Water Building.
I've gone by it.
The 26 acres, the permitting's moving along. All we have to do is, they have to submit the fact that they've paid for their, what is it? Their credits, and then the permit gets issued. So that's moving along. We've actually got the site plan in to start moving forward with that expansion of Horizon. The budget software came today. And if things go well, I may get the first send out to the department heads this week yet. So we may still make the schedule. But it's hard to know because I will be on vacation Thursday, Friday, and until the 3rd.
Will that require training?
Yes, but not a lot. It has a little video that comes with it, and I send it to them, and they send it back to me. We make the final adjustments, then I send it to you. So you'll get it in an email. And then you can review it online. And then it comes with, when you click on one of the line items, it tells you, it gives you the 5-year history and then the 2-year forecast. And so if you click on like the Department of Public Works, it gives you that same thing for the whole Department of Public Works, or if you break it down, it can do it by line item. So it's pretty informative.
Now, after we approve it, will that be available to the public through the website?
Yeah, it'll be really available to the public online. Did you ever, that one day I gave you that data, that website to go to, did you ever go to that website and look at it? It breaks it down into 1 million different charts.
Great.
Be answering a lot of questions.
You thought it did?
No,
Oh.
we will be.
We will be. Okay.
The census, I gave you that document. They're also going to run a recruiting seminar at the library coming up shortly. So if you want a job with the census, that's coming up. Other than that, that's it.
Does anybody have questions or something for Steve before we leave that agenda item?
So do you think there's, I guess I've got to ask this, do you think there's going to be any problem with completing Mulberry by the time the snow flies?
No. No, they'll be done. Their official completion date, I think, was September 17th. I don't think they're going to make that. But unless it's an unusual year, they run asphalt right up until 15th of November. So I'm assuming that there'll be more than plenty done by then. It's just, it'll be longer than we'd hoped for.
We won't get the cool machines South Main Street had for curb and gutter, will we? That was cool from what people told me, that they just went down and out came curb and out came gutter, and it was all in one fell swoop, and boy.
I know most people nowadays use curb machines to pour curb and gutter.
But not our people on Mulberry.
No, I think they will.
You think so?
Yeah, I think they will. Because
Well,
that's
I can't wait.
that's a lot of curb to pour by form. So I anticipate that it'll be poured by machine.
Well,
They'll have asphalt though, not concrete, as a base pavement.
all right. Moving on to council business. Tavern operator licenses, would you read those names for us, please?
Derek Nelson, Darryl Krejci, Michael Carr, Katie Klug.
Okay, is there a motion to approve these tavern operator licenses?
I move approval of those 4 licenses, tavern operators.
Second.
Motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, when you can?
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, item 8B, discussion decision on bid award, American Waste Systems Improvement, Phase 1, and the Brookstone 6 through 9 System Improvement, Phase 2. Now, it says discussion decision. Do we discuss first on this one? And then do a motion? Or why is it written that way? Do you know, Dan?
It's typical. Typically, you make a motion and then you engage in
So
discussion.
this is no different? So you, okay. Hang on a minute, I gotta get back to my thing here. Come on. Sorry for the delay here. Okay, would you read the motion, please?
City Council Motion 19-8-2-1, authorizing city manager to execute an agreement for American Waste System Improvements Phase 1 and Brookstone 6 through 9 System Improvements Phase 2, projects LO3-17A and LO3-18F.
Okay, do I have a motion for?
So move.
Second.
Okay. I now have a motion and a second. What discussion do we need to do on this before we vote? Do you have something you want to say about this?
Yes, they provided several maps. It's essentially running a main loop around the outside edge of Brookstone and tying it into American Way. This brings that loop around from the north side of Brookstone and brings it down along Harvey Road and then back in along the south edge of Brookstone and ties it in at American Way. This spreads out over 72 lots in Brookstone, and then it also is considered a public improvement, so you can't assess all the cost of this to the developer. So the developer's being assessed $1,700 per lot. The rest is assigned to the utility. So the electric utility will be responsible for paying a portion of this. Over time, we'll collect more money and it gets incorporated into the rates. But it is an important feature of that development as well as finalizing the electric system over there. Kind of makes our industrial park more stable as an electric use. So, are there any other specific questions? The bid was unusually low, but they were able to verify that they could do it. They were the ones that did the Mangan development for us.
The quality is okay.
Yeah.
Well, should we vote? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and we're off on that one. C, discussion decision on the request from the Tyranena Ladies Club to use the community center for a fundraiser. This is a yearly, or almost yearly event. So let's take a look here. Would you read that motion, please?
City Council Motion 19-8-2-2, authorizing the use of Lake Mills Community Center by the Tyranena Ladies Club.
Okay, and, okay, let's see. Anybody have a motion for this?
I move adoption of motion 19-822.
Second.
Okay. Is there anything about it that we need to discuss, or is it pretty boilerplate like our other?
Yeah, this is very boilerplate. It just, in order to be able to use the center, which they do on a regular basis, because it's a fundraiser, a private fundraiser, the council has to approve it by policy.
Okay. And there's nothing else? We'll call the roll.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, good. And wish them luck on their fashion show. And let's see, the date for that, from what I'm seeing, is October 24th. Am I reading it right? I think so. So we'll be seeing more about that, I'm sure, in the community. Discussion decision on Faville Park Walkway, item 8D. Would you read that, please?
City Council Motion 19-8-2-3, approving a design concept for the Faville Park sidewalk improvements and authorizing the funding and construction of the improvements.
Okay. Now, there have been oh, wait, let's get a motion. Sorry. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Now, we did go to all the groups that we talked about when this was on the table before. There have been a few changes, not big changes, but changes that met with the approval of some of the landowners in the area, right?
I do not know, Steve was at the
Yeah.
Parks Board meeting, was gonna carry the conversation.
The motion at the Parks Board meeting, I don't know if you could throw this up on the screen or if you want to just go through it.
Put up on
I don't know if you want to put it up or,
the recommendation?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did Rob do a SketchUp for you on that?
No.
Okay.
I saw one, but we,
No,
Yeah,
a lot
it's
of
the
the,
original one.
a lot of the issues they brought up was water and drainage, and
yeah.
did that get discussed?
We discussed that at the Parks Board meeting. At this point, without going in there and doing regrading, I think some of it's coming from the new lots and how they built them up, and the water is doing what it's supposed to. The water is funneling down to the storm drain. The storm drain's at the south end of the park there, where the sidewalk's gonna go.
What I'm worried about is it becoming a barrier there, and small little ponds forming at the edge of the
Going through.
sidewalk.
Yeah, the discussion with Rob there is that if the sidewalk's put in right at grade, it won't be an issue, because the way it's grading. What the Parks Board recommended was to take, I'm trying to think of the name of the street there. I think it's Brewster's off to the right. What's the one to the south here?
Badger?
What is it?
Badger?
Badger. Where the sidewalk would connect that Badger, the storm drains right there in the corner next to the sidewalk, to the east of the sidewalk, the way it is on the drawings. What the Park Board suggested was starting the sidewalk on the east side of the storm drain, going into the park and then curving and meeting up with the existing design sidewalk. So it'd have a little offset in it.
Yeah, I know that the engineer who was providing Rob with information said that a lot of it has to do with the regrading of the lots at the back. And what they had done is they planted a lot of trees and put buildings in them. And the way the subdivision was designed, that was actually supposed to be the swale for the drainage. So they were blocking their own drainage. And that if you put the sidewalk in at grade, especially with them pulling it to the east of the inlet, that should provide more than adequate drainage on our side. It would not be the cause of any blockage in the lots.
I know, I'm just still not convinced it's the best place to put a sidewalk, even if they, they're talking about having baby carriages go through there. I'd rather see sidewalk going up along, is that V there?
Tyranena Park Road.
Yeah, instead of putting a sidewalk through the park. There's just so many days I drive past there on the way home from work, and there's families pushing carriages on the road with their babies in it because there's no sidewalk there. I'd rather see a sidewalk there than running straight through the park. And it doesn't matter whose issue it is right now. If it's going to cause a water issue somewhere or somehow, I think we really need to have engineers look at it before we decide to put a sidewalk in for the convenience of pushing some baby carriages through the park. My understanding is we're switching that over, most of it over to a soccer field, or at least we're going to hopefully do that here in the future. So, I don't know. I'm just not sold on it yet.
You brought up a lot of topics. First of all, it's much more than baby carriages.
It could be for handicap also,
Right.
But,
so we'll carry that one first, is that it's a broader range than just pushing baby carriages through. I don't want to walk away from that one. The engineer did design this, so it is at a grade where they believe that it will drain appropriately. The sidewalk, and you know that I've written a memo about the sidewalk along V, and even if you took that little flare they have on the north end out towards the road and extended it down to East Mills, you probably would come up with something similar. But you'd still have to come down a certain ways to behind the ball field, but you wouldn't have to go all the way down. You follow what I'm saying?
Are we looking at this with an eye on budget money that's been allocated for 2019 to be spent?
Yes. Yeah,
Is there any way we can keep that money, not lose it, and move it to 2020 or 21?
Yes, we always can hold money over. I think what I'm looking at here is if you bring this down behind the diamonds here and you cut it off, because that's access to the benches in the ballpark, right? And then you bring this one up to here and you run this one down here, I think you've accomplished the same thing, right? So you could do that. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to be able to do it this year or wait until next year and do it. What happens is, you all know, at the end of the year, we pass a resolution to hold the money over. But if they're prepared to build this sidewalk here, they can flip that over and build it over here without any significant impact. Other than that, the engineer will have to figure out the grades.
Well, what's the pleasure of the council here?
My opinion is that if you put it on V, you're getting yourself halfway to the completion of the next phase. Because you need to run that all the way down to Brewster eventually.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly where I think it should go to, just because that's where the folks are coming from with their kids, and they're right out there on the road as you're driving down the road. I worry about that more than, my wife's handicapped, I can push her in a wheelchair anywhere. So I don't worry about that through a park. I'd worry about that if I was pushing on the road. I'd really worry about it, but that's just me. So I mean, we have a motion
You
to.
kind of accomplished the same thing here by making that adjustment.
Yeah.
Well, we do have alternatives. We can table, we can change it,
You can amend it,
amend it.
or you can vote on it as is.
Now, if we were to put it up on V, that affects the county. And do we have to get permission from the county to do that? And,
No, no. We've already got sidewalks all the way up and down V, and we have water and sewer. They're more worried about the water and sewer than they are the sidewalks. Because they don't really, what happens with the water and sewers is that settles, and then they get an uneven road, and it's harder for them to maintain the streets, and then you get the manholes and stuff, and they're not used to maintaining streets with public infrastructure.
Yeah, because what I'm also thinking is, obviously, we've got the new subdivision up in there, all the apartments up in there. And I don't know what they have for kids up there, but I'm assuming there's some kids, and if they're coming down to the park, then they're running up and down V, trying to get to that park if they are. Whereas if we had a sidewalk there, it might be a little safer for them. Those are just my thoughts.
it would also identify the area as be ready, for pedestrians.
Yeah.
When you put in a sidewalk, it should tell a driver, there might be people here, whether they're kids or not is not.
I'm open to whatever. I mean, we have a motion already, and we could go with that and vote on it, or we can table it and maybe talk
time
about
if
this a
we
little bit
table
more.
it.
Can I
Yeah,
just
okay.
have a clarification? So what you're saying is along Tyranena Road,
Right.
run it from the proposed path going up to Tyranena Road, or all the way from
Keep
that
taking
whole
all the way
stretch?
Tyranena Road, all along there from, was it Brewster to,
Well,
Well, I don't think we'd have enough money this year to do that.
but if we
But we
went
could
from
run
at
it
least
from
Brewster
this-
down to the parking lot
We
area
could run
there,
it from
yeah.
this point here down to East Mills pretty easy.
I would rather see it,
That's not a lot of additional feet.
yeah, I
And
would
then
rather see it go the other way first.
Well, there's a lot more
I know.
design problems there too, because there's that big hole up there in the corner.
Yep.
And so you'd have to do a lot of fill, and there's a lot of design problems there. That's why I was saying, if you do this half this year, and then you could come back next year and finish it up.
Yeah, it's just that's where I see all the folks coming from. They're either coming from Brewster up around, or they're coming from up in new apartments up there, coming down around with their baby carriages to get down to the park. So that's the area I see most used right now. And that's,
I can tell you that there are a lot of people coming up Badger and moving across that green space too, because I see them every night. That's where I
yeah,
walk
I
my
can only
dog.
tell you what I see, so I don't know. I'm just not convinced that we have a need to have that all through the park.
I think the road is a higher priority than the park.
I would think so too, but
Not saying that we'll never do the park, I'm not saying that, but I think the road is dangerous.
If we're going to be removing the ball diamond and putting in soccer fields, how is that going to impact where you want to do this path now?
It would not. I looked at the redesign, and it wouldn't impact it at all. You would still bring that path down essentially where it's at right now if you ran it through the park. If you put it on the road, it doesn't impact it at all. But the way the soccer fields were laid out in there, there wasn't enough room to get two into that one bottom. There was just one. And it shifted further to the east, which meant that the sidewalk had to go on the west edge. And that's not a guarantee on flipping to a soccer field either. That was one of the proposals. It wasn't this is what we're going to do.
Oh, okay.
Would we have enough money to do the sidewalk on V and take it to East Mills Drive?
Yeah, well,
I mean, to
Find
the
it.
corner, where the corner house is there?
yeah,
We would have enough to do that?
well, we'll find it.
Well, I'm just saying, I mean, I know we're all, we're gonna probably get letters that say, you put a sidewalk in that's not connected to the sidewalk over in the other part. Well, yeah, we kind of know that, but there's a money issue here. And it's not like we're never gonna do it, but we're gonna have to put it in another budget to get money to do that. What do you think?
No, I'm fine with the idea of, that was one of the things we talked about along the highway. That would make sense. That would, I think it would support more residents.
And then, when we finally do whatever it is we're doing with that patch of green space, and if it's a soccer field or it's a baseball field or whatever, let's look at what that actually looks like before we put concrete in.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, I need a motion to amend the motion.
I think what we'd like to see is just table, and then we'll get the additional information on
Get
cost
the
and
engineers
design.
and get, there you go.
Okay? Do I have a motion to table?
So moved.
Second.
And we will vote on the motion to table.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, and then we'll see that on the next agenda.
And thank the Parks Department for all the hard work. I
Well,
don't want
and-
to belittle their work. They did a lot of stuff on it, but
Yeah, my gut feels the same way your gut does and your gut does. Let's get the kids off of this road first, and then deal with the park and the concrete. Okay. Let's move on down. All right. Item E, discussion on social media policy. Oops, sorry. Can you read that for us, please?
City Council Motion 19-8-2-4, approving and implementing the City of Lake Mills social media use policy.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I move adoption of motion 19-824.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, now we can discuss this. Ooh, do we want anybody to speak to this? Do you want to say anything?
So we've dealt with some issues with regard to certain departments in the city utilizing social media without much oversight. And this policy is intended to basically address that issue, specifically creating a framework where a department head requests the ability to utilize some form of social media, appoints an authorized user, there's an application process with regard to that authorized user, and then that authorized user, as part of their job title, then becomes a custodian of the specific social media element that is requested. This is a topic that municipalities are dealing with right now, and I'd say actually we're a little bit behind, maybe progressively speaking, where other communities are at this point. This is consistent with other communities' efforts in this. I think the overall policy is, the pitfalls are that it's a work in progress, and enforcement of this policy is going to be an issue, along with the amount of time and effort and resources that are basically going to be dedicated to this initiative. However, the utility of social media that's available is seen as something that the city is basically losing out on an opportunity there in communicating with constituents and professionals that are utilizing, or that we're utilizing their services, or vice versa. So this is an effort in basically creating a framework and a structure, and doling out responsibilities and obligations with regard to the authorized user that's put in place to manage a specific department's social media presence. How's that?
yeah, sounds good. So I read through a lot of this, and there was a couple spots I just skimmed over because looked like it was boilerplate stuff pulled
And
from.
that's also true. I mean, the terms of use are provided in
Yep.
this document. The standards for appropriate use and standards for management of them in that, so the courts are going through battles right now with
Yep.
regard to freedom of speech on public utilized forums like this. And there's federal cases, there's state cases, all of them are happening right now. So we're very sensitive about blocking versus hiding from view certain messages, blocking specific users versus not. And this attempts to address those issues with the contemporary issues that are occurring right now in line
Yeah.
with that. But it's going to be something that continues to develop because we're receiving law on it right now. We're seeing marketplaces actually react to the use of this now. I mean, it's a contemporary tool. In our lifetime, maybe it's been here for a long time, but it's still at kind of the initiation of the overall utilization of the forum. So it's a work in progress. This is first draft, well, not first draft, but your first blush at it, and I'm looking for reaction and insight from you on, what you want to see, and we thought it was very important to bring this type of policy to the council for your input because it's very wide-ranging across all departments, and it will definitely impact the manner in which the city as an entity communicates with its constituents.
Yeah, I see a lot of things that should be covered in there, and they probably are covered in there if they aren't. So things like not just who is authorized to release it, but who has deemed that information that's being released public. That's one of the biggest issues that you hit a hurdle right there. So a lot of folks or companies that use this, they take the stance that they use it as a format to collect information from people, but when answers have to be given for questions, they direct them to the official channels.
Absolutely, and it makes that effort over and over again. Utilize the city's website. All the information is
Yep.
stored on the city's website, but this is an effective way, social media is an effective way to communicate instantaneously with
You're right.
constituents.
Yeah,
So, but you're right, the depository for information will and is
Surveys.
the city website.
Great thing for surveys, for getting quick information out there about stuff, but yeah, just being cognizant not to answer things that,
Well, and that's why a policy is necessary.
Yep.
Because I mean, we've run awry of maybe prudent use in the
Yeah.
past. So this is attempting to address it. And the other thing that must be considered are the other documents that go along with this. The employee handbook, the city's code of ethics, all of the city policies that are all in place already. This is merely a tool to, create more, to interact more, rather than restraining or changing the rules that are currently in existence.
nope, I got you there. It's just, things I worry about would be, you're out there on some of these Lake Mills pages right now, and people will put out there, why are they doing this? And you'll see people say, this is the wrong format for it, go to the website. And the first time somebody from the city answers one of those, we open the floodgates to that. And
Can of worms, our answers and our correspondence and the interaction must be deliberate. It must
Yes.
be precise, it must be planned. Otherwise, willy-nilly, the Wild West in this situation is very dangerous, especially with open records, open meetings laws, all of the state laws and federal laws that are in place that regulate the business of the city. So yes, very cognizant of it. It's hard to be incredibly precise on that because it is developing.
no.
You
you're
have
right.
departments that want to be dropping something every day.
Right.
And to be able to come up with something every day and not make a mistake and not inflame, we've already talked about that. There was information put out there that shouldn't have been out there. There were projects put out there before council had any idea that projects were out there. And so, Now you're in a position where you've got a public that's got an expectation, and the council hasn't even had an opportunity to evaluate it, and we haven't even had an opportunity to go through all the pitfalls like union MOUs. So, and Dan said it at the beginning, but it went real fast, is that the time and the resources, in order to be able to respond to this and put it out in the way that it takes, you need a lot of resources. The cities that I work with that do this, they have staffs in each department that do nothing but
Social media
respond to
managers, yep.
Facebook.
Yep.
Or all the other Snapchat and Instagram and whatever else is out
Twitter
there.
and- yep.
That, all the 7 or 8. And they monitor it. We were at meetings, they were monitoring it 24/7 and responding to incidences on their phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
We don't want to do that.
you're out there, you're at a meeting, you're not listening, all of a sudden you're looking at this and you're trying to respond to something, and it's like,
Yeah.
people get fired every single day for what they posted on Facebook
Yep.
from a city website.
I think the way that,
That's kind of, my question is, what's the expense of this?
Expense?
Yes, because
Time.
you've got monitors
It's
who needs,
time.
but that's an
Time.
expense.
yep,
Yeah,
it
but I
is,
mean,
it's time.
it's the time, and then staff that's doing this can't do their other jobs.
That's right, and
Well,
that's an
and that's
expense.
the authorized user, it becomes part of their role. And there can be multiple authorized users in one department. There needs to be oversight from the city manager, potentially the city clerk or the city attorney. But it is pretty wide spanning when you think about it. The authorized user, though, is, well, I say there's one in a specific situation. Let's say it's the Department of Public Works. The individual that's in charge of this, that is the authorized users, we really don't know what interaction they'll have, what time will go into it. We know that it will be more time. And I'd expect that if it's utilized like we expect it to be, it will be a lot of time. And with the oversight and everything else that goes into it, I think you're looking at relatively demanding type of stuff when you're talking about man hours, when you're talking about the resources that are available, in a relatively slim workforce as it is.
So if you look at it and you're saying you have 9 departments, and all of them have a Facebook, and they all have authorized posters, at least one, some more, and now the city manager is responsible to make sure that the content of every one of those is appropriate and responsible, that's not happening.
No,
No,
but
and-
that's where you have it laid out pretty well, and you have your signed documents and things like that that'll hold those folks responsible for what they
Accountability
put out
is there. The enforcement aspect is a work in progress.
Yeah,
As president of the council, I don't want any of my departments to be posting on a daily basis, something on Facebook or something. That's a lot of time.
it could be a lot of time.
And we
but-
have a very tight, I mean, we're already asking people to work a
But,
lot
yeah,
for-
you're right, but we're in that day and age that all the folks that live in the city or even work in the city want that information, and they want it quickly, and this is how they get that information. And if they don't get it from an authorized source in the city, they're going to get it from somewhere else, and then we fight the rumor mill, because those rumors aren't quite correct. Like I was telling Steve, my mom came up to me the other day and said, hey, I heard that as soon as they shut down for the winter, they're tearing down the restaurant at the beach. Well, no, they're not doing that.
No.
But that's the type of stuff that you have to deal with. So I can see it as a benefit as long as it's managed appropriately. And the only way you really know that you could do that is to actually try it.
And what we have right now is, very little oversight in a couple of departments that are acting relatively independently compared to the city. So the
We need to
thought
pull-
process here is cut that off.
Yeah, I'd
Yep.
say we need to
Policy
cut
is
that
That's
off.
what this
zero
policy
social
will
media
do.
whatsoever, or you can evolve it.
Right.
You can go through the process, be deliberate about your decision-making, and attempt to put a policy in place that regulates and controls the message and the interactions that are occurring. Certainly more so than is occurring right now.
Yeah, and I think what you have in there does hold folks accountable, and it does lay out what they can and can't do pretty darn well.
Thank you.
If you can get them to read it. And then train
Well,
them.
it was submitted to all of the department heads for feedback, and I did get some very valuable feedback
Good.
on it. Would I have liked more? Absolutely. I think that this is an issue that affects the city and affects the departments and its employees is very much. It's a contemporary issue with the country, the world. It's the manner in which people communicate now by choice or not, and it's something that we're going to have to address in some way, shape, or form in the future, if not now.
I just don't think we have the budget for a PR department.
No.
And I don't want to go to my constituents and say, we're going to increase your taxes because we're putting somebody in to monitor Facebook.
Yep.
That, I won't do that. And if somebody on staff here just loves doing that, they probably need to find a job in a different city that has a budget for public relations. Because we just don't have the money to pay somebody to do that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
We do
well,
public relations every day whether we want to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but not.
Sometimes it's not done
not-
very well, but we
Yeah.
do it.
But not watching the Facebook and doing, it's not Facebook, it's pretty much people-oriented here.
What is it that they have to get off of Facebook instantaneously? They can't get off the website or making a phone call to staff here?
It's a little
What is
bit.
it, what is it that they need to get instantaneously that's not already available?
It's just that's how folks communicate nowadays.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
just
I-
saying, why would I spend money to have, if I need 2 vehicles at home for my wife and I, why would I buy a third one just to have one sitting around? What do we need to spend money on that they don't have access to?
Well, for instance, the police department is making an effort to produce goodwill stories that they think is important. Don't kid yourself. This is already occurring.
It's happening, yeah.
Employees are on Facebook on behalf of the city on a regular basis with regard to certain departments in the city. It is. The amount of time and the amount of resources that are to be dedicated to this effort, that's ambiguous in my mind right now. I could see a situation where a department director who has authority over his or her employees certainly could dictate, you are allowed to spend 20 minutes per week on this project. I don't know, that's not written in that right now. We don't have a stark rule, but department directors are still in charge of their employees. Steve Wilkie is still in charge of the entire employment system of the city. There's room for movement there. The rules aren't that stark. There is activity right now, and my opinion is that activity needs to be regulated. Very much so.
I believe that. I just don't want to see this blow up to be a whole new
100% agree.
full-time position where we're creating something
The debate
because.
that Steve and I have had over and over and over again on this is, do we commit time and resources and effort to this, or do you just close off that water tap and say, this is not the manner in which the city of Lake Mills is going to communicate with people right now? Just cut it off.
In my best dreams, I would love not to be on Facebook at all. I think it's a hazard all the way around. It's a black hole, but we do not have one newspaper or one TV station or one radio station that covers Lake Mills. And when you ask people in Lake Mills, what newspaper do you read to get your information? It's like, there's 7 different newspapers they're reading.
Or none at all.
Or none at all. Or, what TV station are they watching? So for
Half for Milwaukee and half for Madison.
and so it's hard to communicate with them. So like when I said, probably the easiest way for us to communicate is to put a flashing billboard up in the Commons that has all the information on it, right? Because that's probably the only place other than Facebook. But when you get on Facebook, today I was reading about that County Highway B is the alternate route for 94, and when they redo 94 next year, that's why they redid County Highway B this year. Well, no, the alternate route for the interstate is 89 to 18, and then whatever state route back, they don't use county highways. But that's on Facebook. Somebody got it posted and someone started the rumor. So if you're not absolutely precise in how you think about it, and I write emails on a daily basis where I wish I could pull it back because, okay, that was not the way to word that. And so you're out on Facebook and all of a sudden you got all these people reading it, and you got, by the time you can get in and correct it, there are 10 million comments. It's really difficult. But on the other hand, it's, what do you do? Where do you go? The website, I agree, but a lot of people don't use websites anymore. They're past that.
Yep. And, to make a long story short, what they've done here for us is they've taken the Wild West and they put some regulations around it. And it's not to say that every agency or department will start doing it.
I can guarantee the city attorney's office will not.
Right,
100%.
exactly.
No
But
chance.
if they do, there's a regulation to guide them. And there's some oversight to make sure that stuff isn't going awry. Because right now, like I said, it's a gun show out there, Wild Wild West, and they can put whatever they want to out there on this, and this just helps.
And they do.
Right, this just helps control it, is what he's trying to do with this. So it sets some guidelines around it, and if it doesn't work, obviously we can change it.
I think maybe this would be a really good time for those who do listen to this program to say that if you're going to put something on Facebook, please call the city office first and ask if what you're saying is true. I mean, just this past week, we had somebody who put on that we were selling the trailer court. I mean, we aren't selling the trailer court. We have never talked about it, or, and yet the person thought, oh, I gotta put this on, and then so-and-so says, well, that's it, and then this one. Don't do that. It's like starting a wildfire. Call us. Find out what the right information is, and then if you want to put the right information on, it's a free country. You can do that.
If you called me and you asked me, have we ever discussed selling the trailer park, I'd say yes. I would say the council is generally in favor of not selling the trailer park, but we have discussed it.
But we've never talked about it on an agenda item.
No,
of
and
selling.
we never put it into a position where it was
No,
a
we've
done deal.
never.
And
I've
but
been on it since the 80s.
It's like what happened with South Main Street and that communication gap. If someone calls into the city and asks the question, and they don't know what question to ask, we don't know how to answer. And there's always that. So when the state told us one thing and we interpreted it another way, that's always going to happen in a phone call, over the website, over Facebook. There's just going to be information gaps because that I think like a city manager. I don't think like someone who's living on South Ferry Drive. And so those are kind of situations in which we live, in which my communication, I really, really have to work hard on being able to make people understand what I'm thinking, because I think I incorporate, when I read it, I'm looking at the 10 or 15 different comprehensive plans that we've done, and I put them all together, and I know how they all tie together and what their concepts were, but to explain that in 10 minutes is pretty difficult. And so it's never, and when you're on Facebook or, God forbid, Twitter, and 150 characters, you just can't do anything. You just can't be concise and clear. But so at what level are you trying to communicate? Even if they call, there's a pretty good opportunity to miscommunicate. A pretty good opportunity.
Yeah. Well, anyway,
I've got one specific question. Items, number 7, content related to city business shall be maintained in an accessible format so that it can be readily produced in response to a public records request. What do you see as an accessible format?
We've debated different manners in which this can be managed. Screenshots, printing off, interactions on a regular basis, forming some form of retrievable record. That's what you need. And you can save it in multiple places, you can print off hard copies, but some form of action like that would be necessary for public records purposes specifically. It's a city forum, it must be preserved.
So in other words, we'd have to add that to our archives
Yeah, absolutely.
in a paper form.
There are other acceptable forms of saving stuff. I mean, everything could be stored on a hard drive, just so you can retrieve it in the future. Paper is historically the way that city governments do store documents.
Who does the archival work?
The city clerk.
But
It
I
has
want
to
to
be
back up
provided
here a
to
second. I want to back up here a second because the Supreme Court just decided that metadata was a public record. So
data?
if someone requests the metadata,
Metadata,
you have
the
to be
data
able to
behind.
produce the metadata. Paper
Data-
will not
Right,
suffice.
the data behind the
Interactions,
information
via
that's
text,
flowing.
everything.
It's what builds the message.
Well, I recall when I worked on the email archive system, how convoluted and expensive that whole thing got. And then we didn't have people who wanted to comply. They didn't want to use their official city email address that they were given. They wanted to use their personal email address. And then they promised that they would forward emails so that it would be captured under the email archive system. And it was a nightmare. And now that we're going to be trying to archive Facebook posts, we won't have that same retrieval system that we had to spend a lot of money to provide for ourselves for the email archive system, that I'm not sure that technology is capable of doing it, but I'm not sure that we're capable of paying for it. Because it got to be very expensive to do the email archiving system, and that was just email. I can't imagine, like, if you looked at, everybody that's on Facebook already knows that we have the Lake Mills Community Network, so I don't think I'm giving away any secrets here. If we were to try to archive everything that got posted under the Lake Mills Community Network, because somebody years from now might want to do an open records request about a particular topic that got talked about under that, that would be a nightmare. And,
If we're not going to manage it, we need to shut it off.
yeah,
Seriously.
yeah, I
If
agree.
no other reason for that specific concern.
Who's the
Yeah.
RDA manager? Are you doing that? The RDA, the records disposition? So setting the time frame of how long specific types of records are kept?
That's state set. And-
We adopted that
Right.
schedule.
Oh, that's right,
a few
that's right.
months ago,
You're right,
but
you're right.
maybe
Okay,
half a
so
year
we already
ago.
have that. So, yeah. So we could effectively whittle it down if we really had to. I'm assuming with Office 365 now, I don't know what was bought, but I'm
Yeah,
assuming we have the archive ability in there for the legal holds. And I believe Twitter and Facebook both have the same
backup, yes.
functions that you can get. I don't know what their cost is, but it'd be a lot less than trying to build those archival systems on our own right now, so.
But how long will Facebook maintain that information? Their schedule for holding information in an archive might be completely different than
You
what the
can-
state requires.
You can set those and pay for that also if it's an extra cost.
Maybe we need to do a little bit more research on that aspect of this.
So I guess the question is, can we still pass this to have a framework and then work out the archival piece after it? Otherwise, we still have the folks out there that are freewheeling, doing what they want to, or do we tell them, stop for now
Well-
until we can?
I think while we're studying this, I think we need to tell them to stop for now, because those Facebook pages that have been permitted were only permitted because the city allowed them to be there. They belong to the city. I think the city has the wherewithal to say, for right now, while we're studying this whole thing, shut it down.
I'm okay with that.
And we have a motion on the floor for that right now, because that's what our motion is, right? To pass this.
No, well, yes, but that's not, this motion is just to set the rules
It's
for
adoption of this
use of it,
policy.
adoption of the policy. So we would table this.
We would table this, or?
I would say we would table this,
Oh,
and then we would just give direction that they're to stop using those for now until we finish studying this.
but we haven't, that hasn't been on the agenda.
Well, I don't think you need, in my opinion, there would be, the city manager can make that direction.
He can make that direction.
All right.
I think-
okay.
Action on
Yeah.
that. Adoption of this policy is a different issue than
Oh,
Steve managing his
Yep.
employees, his departments.
Yep.
I think we can adopt this policy, and just with our communication here with Steve, is that to comply with this, until there's a formal way they know that they can archive everything, it needs to stop until they know they can comply with this.
Yeah, unless we want to have an archival piece built into this
The
policy.
document does
Does say
say,
that.
I mean,
Does
it
it?
does,
Yes.
it does
Oh, you're
direct.
right, it does. You're right.
direct maintenance
Right.
and archiving of appropriate data, okay? But it doesn't provide the specific framework and how that is to be accomplished.
Gotcha.
Emailing to yourself on your city website or your city email address, paper copies or whatever manner it may be. There's a ton of different options there, and that is probably something that's appropriate to investigate.
Okay, I'm
That might be the timeout point where they can get that part in place then.
yeah, I'm flexible either way. If we think we want to pass this, and then Steve manages the expectations right now
Yeah.
until we start discussing.
well, I think we just have to give
Archival
him the power to
processes.
say no to the people who are,
Steve can manage his
yeah,
employees.
he can do that.
If there are questions at this point and you have concerns regarding any aspect of this, don't just push it through for no reason at this point. We can continue to develop it while Mr. Wilkie directs his department heads to,
The only-
cease.
The only problem I had was making sure that we had some language in there already for archival. And if it says archival and then
All
we-
records must be maintained.
Exactly.
It says it over and over again.
then we can build that process at a later date. It doesn't have to be in this.
And
But
this
I
can
go
be,
back to my point, which is that we've got, basically what I'm hearing is an unknown potential expense to operate the policy.
not right now, he's doing it all.
We're still spending it now.
Yeah, they're still
We're just
spending it
putting
right
more
now,
on
and
Steve's shoulders.
Steve's
He's
just
got
gonna
broad shoulders.
tell them to
Yeah, but,
stop
yeah,
doing it
what
right now.
like the technology, it grows, and this will have an effect on the budget. At least it certainly,
It
am I
might.
wrong?
Well, depending on, we already know it's going to consume time.
Yeah.
How much additional time over what we normally put into public information is, it'll be some, but I don't know that it's that much. The archival system, let's say we come back and we say we want, because Vicki, you remember, the email system was $13,000 out of the box.
Yeah, and then it got even more expensive
Because
because
we had to
then we had to
upgrade.
get bigger.
Yeah, run out of
And it
storage.
continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger all the time. Now we flipped to 360, so we get some there, but, so as the technology changes, but let's say we come out of the box, and we'll have to do research, because I'm sure other cities have the same policy. And maybe they use something that's relatively simple, but if we have to go to something like a archival system for the emails, that could be a $20,000 out of the box cost.
That would be discussed under budget
Yes,
and not here tonight.
we could do it that way, but then I would keep them off Facebook until we had.
Oh, yeah, I agree. But I think this is a good point to start at.
Well, my question is, what's, in your position as city manager, what do you see as the advantages and disadvantages?
The advantage is communication and the disadvantage is miscommunication. Because once you make a mistake on Facebook, everybody knows. You know, everybody here makes mistakes all the time. And we hopefully learn from it and move on. Facebook, it gets to be a real difficult problem because there are people trolling you all the time. So to be as concise as it requires to be able to provide the communication takes even more time.
Do we have people who are trained to do that now?
No. We do not have anybody who's trained to do that type of work.
So then are we putting ourselves into jeopardy if we pass this policy, or would it be better to not pass the policy right now and wait and do more development?
I think we're busy enough already. We don't need more work.
One of my,
Well, I'm concerned about our employees because the employees' time is an expense for the city. And Steve is concerned about accuracy.
There's always going to be jeopardy. And the way this is written, the jeopardy keeps rising until it hits a certain spot. And the more people you have out there doing it, the higher the risk of having more jeopardy.
So let me throw this out there then. So a risk of not having this in place would be something similar to, say, Public Works hires somebody and we don't have a policy out there for them to read, but then they start answering Facebook and Twitter on their own because they didn't get the word that come down to them saying, you can't use this. And then they start answering. And there's no policy for us to go back to and say, this is our policy, this is what you're supposed to have read first day, whatever. That's one thought of why.
You're crossing a fine line there, though. Most of what we're looking at here is city-sponsored. If you're on the privates, if you're responding as an employee from your private account, you got to be careful of what you're telling them they can and can't do.
Well, the line I was crossing is saying they could create their, exactly, in city business, and they could build their own account saying, I'm Department of Public Works, whatever.
Well, and we essentially had that happen because the fire department one was created by volunteers on volunteer time. And nobody here knew anything about it.
Right, so that's where having this policy in place, even though you're telling them, don't use this now until we work on it, at least it has we have something in the back end if something happens.
That's
my only thought about it.
So in other words, you think there's an advantage to passing this right now?
Yes, to having it in place right now, because even if we go through all our research afterwards and we decide, okay, we don't want anybody using it, there's no reason we can't come back and get rid of this. But at least we have something in case somebody does run rogue, do something on their own out there. It covers us as a city in case they put something out there on behalf of whatever, the electric department, the DPW, the whatever.
We're also helping Steve because we're taking the onus at the council level and saying, this is what our policy is as of today, and we are directing him to do what we direct him to do. Otherwise, it leaves him floundering out there without the backing of the council, too.
Yeah, good way of thinking about it, yep.
I think we do have employment policies that could right now shut down city employees deciding to be spokespersons on behalf of the city.
I agree.
that
If they're
we could-
enforced,
We
if
could
they're
still
interpreted and
enforce
enforced,
policies
yes.
now on that sort of behavior. One other thing that I have a concern about is the amount of time that people are going to be spending on these accounts if they're created, because everybody has smartphones now. You could have somebody sitting at home deciding that they're going to monitor their department's Facebook page and respond in the middle of the night because somebody made a comment, and they're an hourly employee, and now they want to be paid overtime. We have to control that as well, and I don't know if this policy goes into that in enough depth.
It wasn't intended to specifically because the employee-employer relationship still occurs. There's still a boss that dictates when and how that individual can work.
And
There should
so,
only be 2 people.
so that there would have to be some understanding from the department head that employees aren't going to be doing this 24/7.
Right, this is the scope of your role as authorized user, yes.
And that's where some of the first comments I made is, it can be used for certain things. It can be used to put stuff out there. But if somebody is trying to get specific answers from you on that type of resource, they should take the road of directing them to call this number, call the city, call whatever, and get them off that platform as quick as they can.
Or just not respond at all until during normal business hours.
Yeah.
And then direct them to do whatever. I think that's the first thing, is nobody who's an authorized user is to be doing this except if they're already clocked in at their job. They can't be doing it on their own time, because then you're going to start getting overtime claims.
You also get stuff going on in the middle of the night when everybody else is sleeping and nobody's going to catch it until 5 hours later when, holy cow. A lot happens in a few hours for other people who are awake. You can't put out a fire if you don't know it's burning.
A lot of what ifs. I guess the question is, if we pass this, this will give you the council's full support.
Tell them
Not
we
that
did
you
it.
need it to direct, not that you need it to
Mrs.
direct.
Fritsch did this. It's all her fault.
Yeah, those employees, but obviously it's important enough that both of you put a lot of time and effort into this to bring it forward. So my assumption is it's important to you that you have something like this in place.
Can you live with it?
Can I? Yeah, I can live with it. I mean, I'm a dinosaur. I still read the newspaper every day, but all my department heads are younger, and they're like, hey, this is an important feature of being able to communicate. And to a certain extent, they're right. But as you notice, they get their fingers burned.
Well, we need to take care of you as much as we take care of everybody else in the city. And, we don't want you flapping out there in the wind without support.
Yeah, and this just gives you another tool in the toolbox to get the proper information out in a timely manner.
If I may, I'd be interested in Mr. Buckles' opinions on this based on, he's a student representative, he's a generation that you aren't.
Wave your hand over.
And it's his last meeting.
Yeah, thanks. From my perspective, social media is inevitable, and it's whether we like it or not, it's how most people are going to get their news from here on out. Like me personally, I'd rather go to a website and figure out things from factual sources, but that's not the way 90% of my generation is doing it and is going to do it. So the sooner that we can get a policy in place to ensure that we don't make a mistake, that spreads like wildfire. And if it comes to a point where we just, like Mills isn't involved in social media, pretty easy for rumors to spread. It goes from one to next, and if we don't have a way to put out a factual source that says this is how it's actually happening, you'll have somebody who's never going to check the website and go off exactly what they read on Facebook and tell people around town in person, repost it. So I'm in support of the policy right away, like, as soon as possible, because having guidelines prevents us from having disaster tomorrow, the next day. I mean, you never know when it's going to hit.
Well said.
I'm assuming we'll have periodic updates on this.
As needed, huh?
You can ask the question, and I'll tell you what I know.
Is this a good time to take a roll call vote
I think so.
without calling the question? We're ready to vote.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
And had we known that was going to be that long, we would have moved you up on the agenda. So sorry. Okay. Moving to item 8F, discussion decision on Sandy Beach Phase 3 archaeological evaluation. Would you read that motion, please?
City Council Motion 19-8-2-5, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement between the City of Lake Mills and Commonwealth Heritage Group.
Okay, do I have a motion in order to do discussion on this item?
I move motion 19-825.
Second.
Okay. And Steve, can you just,
Start it out? Yep.
yeah, please.
As part of the project, we were required to do a Phase 1 archaeological on the Sandy Beach site. We did the full beach area, just because we might as well do it as long as we're down there. The report was attached. Some interesting information in that. And there was enough archaeological evaluation material in there that they recommended going to Phase 2. Of course, a Phase 2 has a price tag. It's attached, $32,000. We will need to do that if we are going to continue with the project. I don't think there's any choice. So we will continue to finance out of the council contingency until we're out of money, and then we'll wait till the end of the year and pick out of the other categories that we can use to finish funding it. But I think we need this in place to finalize the information we have. The two gentlemen, is it Mr. Watson okay? They're here and available to answer any questions about the previous evaluation and their proposal. They are the archaeologists that we have used historically, at least their firm has been. And so they have a pretty good handle on what we do here, and they were very interested in the Sandy Beach site and continuing to do it. So if you have any questions for them, they are more than willing to answer. I think Robin answered some of the questions for you. I think that in the long run, we might have some type of feature down there describing what the history was and those types of things. But I don't know if you read that in there. There's some interesting items like a geomorphology, which I'm sure that they could describe better than I can. So if you have any questions on any of that,
Could I request that they give us a kind of a thumbnail description of what their findings are for public consumption?
We need to
Make a motion to suspend the rules to allow them to speak.
they're part of the,
I make that motion.
I'll second it.
Would you do the roll, please?
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch? Motion passed 5-0.
If you'd like to come up to the
Would you-
podium, guys, and
Especially since you waited all this while, at least we'll let you talk a little bit. This is also a topic of great interest in the city. We have a lot of people who care about the archaeology of the city.
After all, we're called the Pyramid City.
now we're under an agreement that they will not answer any questions about pyramids.
Right. No pyramids, no.
No pyramids.
We're not.
Okay,
So, my name is Robert Watson, and I'm the Regional Director of Commonwealth Heritage Group in Milwaukee, and my colleague here is Richard Edwards, and he was the supervisor of the Phase 1 archaeological research that was done in the park. We did do the entire park as was requested, because as Steve stated, the park is the ultimate, the development of the park is the ultimate goal. So rather than just focus on the boat launch, we did everything so that our thought was, let's just get this out of the way and be done with it. Well, as listening to your discussions on when you open up roads and you find that pipes are not as deep as they're supposed to be, that's the same thing with archaeology, is that you really don't know what you're dealing with until you dig it out. And what we found was that in the area of the park where the boat launch is scheduled to be near the sand volleyball courts, we identified materials indicative of what we call the middle woodland stage, which dates from anywhere from 200 BC to about 500 AD. And these deposits were down deep between 50 and 60 centimeters below the surface. I don't have a calculator, so I can't convert that to English. We work in the metric system in archaeology, and so
I think it's like 2 feet roughly.
so this is significantly deep. And the thing about the middle woodland in this area is there's not a whole lot known about it. And these deposits that we found seem to be only middle woodland. So we call these single component deposits. Those are even rare. So what you may have in Sandy Beach Park is a single component middle woodland occupation that is stratified, meaning it's too deep to have been plowed, and we don't know that there's ever been plowing in that area, and it seems like it's undisturbed, meaning that the development of the park, the ice house, and some of the other features that were in the park before have not had an impact on it.
And for common consumption, this would then mean that it's not related to the Aztlan.
No, this is about 500 years earlier than Aztlan. However, as we may, when you get back in the past, you don't know what cultures influenced and had the developmental influence on later ones.
At 500 years earlier than Aslan, what time frame is that?
Well, you're looking at AD 500. That's the very end of Middle Woodland, but it spans the AD BC threshold. So 250 BC to AD 500. So you're talking about 750 years of culture. Now, what we found in these deposits were ceramics that are very indicative of the Middle Woodland, specifically what we call shorewood cord roughened. And we also found a prismatic blade made of an exotic chert, gray chert that's native to southern Indiana, southern Illinois, and that's a hallmark of this Middle Woodland time period. And also some bone implements, which also. So this deposit alone was interesting enough to us to suggest, and if it's stratified, which it appears to be, it's got the information potential to contribute to our understanding of the past, which is a requirement, and the integrity, the subsurface integrity, which are two requirements for the National Register. And so the next step, phase 2, is to apply the standards of eligibility as defined by the National Historic Preservation Act to this site to see if it does meet these criteria. If it does, then then you gotta start talking about mitigating effects, so there may be additional work required. Just letting you know that this may not be the end, but it's the first step in determining what you're dealing with. In another part of the park, we found additional materials unrelated to the middle woodland occupation that is late woodland, which would be more akin to what you see at Ashland. My feeling is, based on the research or the work that Rick did, is these will not be found to be significant or eligible for the NRHP, but you don't know until you look, until you dig them up. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. Is that kind of, hopefully?
The mound area in the second part of what you did, can you just, that is not an Indian mound, right?
The large, you mean you're talking about the really big?
Yeah.
We don't think it is. Now,
Yeah. And that's important to say because there's a lot of rumor in town about
Right,
that being
because that-
an Indian mound.
well, the thing is,
That's where the geomorphs come in.
right, and that's, as Steve alluded to, that's where the geomorphology comes in. Geomorphology is basically this study of sediments, the study of site formation processes, and the study of just how nature formed the landscape that people then occupied. There used to be, or there was, a mound group in the park, but by all accounts, it's been destroyed. And if you see the map that we included with our report, it's a blue kind of L-shaped. It's this part here with that bigger, what people are saying is a mound in the middle of it. Now, initially, our initial, we did some testing of that mound. We don't think it's made by human activity. We think it's probably glacial in origin, and it's just, a mound or any, yeah, right, there you go, thank you. Any large promontory, people are obviously, especially in this area, they're gonna say, oh, that's a mound. We don't feel it was, but we would, as part of the phase 2 evaluations, we would do some geomorphology on that to determine and to make that a final determination on that. Now, the blue area is still considered a burial site by the state, so we would have to treat it accordingly, but our initial investigations did not identify anything that would be construed as human remains or human burials. So those likely have been destroyed by past land use.
My understanding, maybe I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but I thought I had heard that earlier in the last century, the University of Wisconsin Archeological people came out and actually removed some things from this area. Did you run into knowledge of that?
They did, this area was included in survey work done by UWM in the 1980s.
That was UWM, not Madison.
Yes. Milwaukee did a survey in the 80s, but it was entirely a visual survey. I don't know of any mound excavations that was done at this site.
Maybe that isn't true.
There was a report that in the 60s, the property owner dug up several skeletons that were identified as, but they were all moved to Milwaukee.
Oh, prior to the Milwaukee Public Museum. Yeah. And that's, prior to the National Historic Preservation Act, stuff like that happened all the time, unfortunately.
Okay.
So, and Charles E. Brown, or as we affectionately call him, Charlie Brown, who was the first director.
Get closer to the mic, it's hard to hear.
Oh, I'm sorry, I keep.
Yeah, it's all right.
Charles E. Brown, who was an early director of the State Historical Society in Wisconsin, he did excavate a number of mounds in the park, and he did remove human remains from them. So that was in the 20s.
Okay. All right. So there may have been some more here.
There
We don't
most
have any
certainly-
proof of it.
There most certainly was, yeah. Well, other than just the accounts that Charles E. Brown and others excavated mounds and removed not only human remains, but artifacts as well.
We have made an offer to the tribe that if they want to come in and do their own survey, they could. They've been given that option, right? I think SHPO's done that.
I know that the Fish and Wildlife has reached out to gauge their interest. Sometimes sometimes they don't respond, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't have an interest. But you're dealing with, what may have been a mound group, and so I would suspect that the tribes would have interest in this project. And coordination with them, that's the federal agency's responsibility. So that would be Fish and Wildlife would take that lead.
And he said this was a step, this is actually step 2. We did phase 1, so this is phase 2, and there
Right.
could be a phase 3 yet.
If
And
it's,
then
if
there's
it's
a
determined eligible.
then there's like a remediation plan that would
Right.
come after that if we have to go that route.
Right. I mean, there's always the option of avoidance, and if that's just not feasible, then that's when it kicks in the other things.
So for phase 2, what are the processes associated with the price tag of?
Well, the geomorphology is a big cost. We have a geomorphologist that we subconsult with who's out of Madison, and he actually did his dissertation research on the Rock River, and so he's very familiar with this area. The other thing is that archaeology is it's time and people. We've got it scoped to have as many people on site. I think 4 people on site, 4 to 6. We want to get it done quickly to help your process. But digging down to 60 centimeters by hand takes time. So it's labor intensive, it's time intensive, and then when you get everything out of the ground, you got to figure it out. You got to analyze the materials, and you have to put it all into a regional context. So most of it is labor intensive.
There might be some historical value in what we find, right?
I think there certainly is. And as you mentioned earlier, I think there's value for the community in it. Signage, interpretive panels, all kidding aside, Lake Mills is very highly aware of their archaeological history. And I think this is another opportunity, could be, to highlight that. Apart from the statutory requirements for moving forward. I think it's a good opportunity to educate the general public and the community at large.
So all the surveying would be done by excavation? You wouldn't use the ground penetrating radar or?
We don't typically do ground penetrating radar. Ground penetrating radar is great for pointing out anomalies, but they ultimately have to be ground truth, so you got to dig them anyway.
Not sure if you mentioned this, but what would be needed to institute a phase 3?
So the phase 2 stage is evaluation under National Register criteria. So if the site is found to meet any or all those criteria, and usually with archaeology you have D, which is information potential, criterion D, which is information potential. And the big kicker, or the crucial components of that for archaeology are integrity, which this site seems to have, and information potential, which this site, if it is a single component woodland occupation, definitely would have. So that would kick that in. Then what you have to do is you have to, under the NRHPA, you have to mitigate effects to the site if you cannot avoid adverse effects. So if it meets the criteria and it's eligible for the register and you can't avoid adverse effects to it, then you have to mitigate those effects, which usually is it's large-scale excavation like what you see on the Discovery Channel or something like that. That's where the square holes and that again is then another level of.
The specifics would depend on what we find during the phase 2, though.
Right.
So if we find a lot of stuff, or if it ends up being all in one area, it would be very different ways of mitigating it.
Would the city have to finance that, or would there be other sources?
Are there grants available for that?
That I don't know. Typically, it's the project proponent that's responsible for that. If you want your project to move forward, then that's the cost of doing business. The DOT runs into the same problem all the time. It's not, I shouldn't call it a problem. The DOT runs into the same issue all the time when they're building roads, and they've got important sites in their roadway. They got to mitigate effects, and then they can build their roads.
So if I'm hearing you right, and maybe I'm wrong, what you're saying is if you dig down and you find this early civilization that you're talking about, one of the things would be to remove the articles, do something like we talked about earlier in the meeting, making some displays or do something like that, and then making the ground, putting the ground back in and using it for a beach like it is now?
Right. The thing is, when you do, if the site is deemed to be eligible for the National Register.
Yeah, if it's got value.
And you mitigate effects. One of the components of mitigating effects is something for the public benefit, because every time the thing about archaeology is when you dig a site, you destroy it. And so there has to be something that you give back to the public for destroying that site. So there's something about the public benefit. And that is one of the things that is usually looked pretty favorably upon, is if you can inform the public, like, this is what was here. And usually the whole site doesn't get destroyed while you're excavating it. You try to minimize that, and so there still may be some left. And so, people can stand there and say, under your feet once was, and then you can have reproductions of the artifacts or things of that nature. There's always a possibility it's not eligible, and if that's the case, then you're done.
But then we could send them under Mulberry Street to check out the lake under there. Which, we all know there's a lot of water there. Well, where do you come from tonight?
We drove in from Milwaukee.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate you coming, and we appreciate you staying. Sorry.
It's all right. We appreciate the chance to talk with you about this.
Okay, now, does anybody else have questions? I wasn't trying to cut it off, but I thought.
Even if it doesn't qualify, we could still set up a display as.
Absolutely. Yep.
Where are the objects that you have found so far?
Most of them are back at our office, but I did bring some.
Right. So, yeah, we did bring some things to share with you.
Good question, Mr. Fritz.
In other words, shards and
Boy,
things.
Yeah, we got some
Yes,
pottery and
tonight.
we got brought along the blade. I mean, we can.
Could you talk into the mic? I know, but it's.
It's ringing in my ears, though.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we got some of the pottery here, and
With the, you said you found some animal bones, was it?
it's actually a bone tool. But yeah, it's an animal bone.
Can that be, could the DNA or could that be radiocarbon dating?
Oh yeah, any of this could be. Well, it could be bone collagen dated. I don't think you wouldn't necessarily do that.
Leave them in the bag. We can pass the bags around.
I think the.
Ooh, that's a nice one.
Themselves are.
Oh,
They usually provide you a good enough
Artist did
idea
that.
of the data.
How advanced are we talking about with these, looking at the arrowheads here, it looks like there's some sophistication here.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's, people were very well adapted to making a living in this part of the world at that time, and so, yeah, I mean, we don't typically like to use advanced or words like that, but there's some very sophisticated workmanship with not only the arrowheads, but the blade.
Pottery.
And with the pottery itself.
That's
That was pottery. I wouldn't have known that.
Oh.
Yeah, you could cut, you could cut yourself with that blade if you weren't careful.
Yeah.
It's still that sharp, so yeah, it's good stuff.
And you said the obsidian came from southern Indiana?
It's not obsidian, it's it's called Dongolia or Indiana hornstone. You can see it's gray, which is very unusual except in middle woodland contexts in Wisconsin. So the thought is that was brought in by trade or by some other exchange.
One of the things that makes the middle woodland stand out from other time periods or earlier time periods is they have really big, really extensive trade networks. So there's items moving from the Rocky Mountains up, other things coming from Canada, the Gulf of Mexico, and they're being oftentimes buried in these ceremonial mounds and things like that.
We don't see any copper yet, right?
Copper has actually been used for a couple thousand years before this.
Oh, really?
That's coming from northern Wisconsin.
So you're glad that we called you?
Oh, we're always glad when people call us.
And that we didn't just ignore everything?
I don't think we'd have had that opportunity.
Well, it happens. Not here. Okay. So now, our motion, I gotta get back to the motion. Okay, so the motion is to approve agreement.
Go to phase 2. Proofs.
Yep, and it includes a bill of $32,666.20, right? Okay, so that's the motion that's on the table. Anybody else have any other questions or discussion? Otherwise, we can take a vote. Okay, seeing none, call the roll.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt?
Aye.
Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay. Another thing to make us legendary, right? Even though I don't know if we're legendary anymore. Okay, well, recommendations for future agendas. Do we have anything you want to put on the agenda right now? Otherwise, we could, thank you very much again. Otherwise, would you read item 10 for us, please?
Convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute, Section 19.85, Sub 1, Sub E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session.
Okay. Is there a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Call the roll.
Mr. Fritsch?
Aye.
Ms. Schmidt? Mr. Fields?
Aye.
Mrs. Fritsch?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0.
Okay, so we'll be moving into closed session. Do we?
Won't be coming back.
Do we anticipate anything if we do decide something in closed session, it'll come at the next meeting, on the agenda for the next meeting? So we won't have any other, we aren't going to reopen the, okay. So we will move into closed session at this point. And I don't need to use the gavel because we're not shutting anything down.
That's right.
So, and thank you to everybody who's watching, and I hope you enjoyed the archaeology lesson. So.